and things you don't really need to know, but probably should. I'm Ciara Ryven, and this is the Sunday 7.
On today's episode of the Sunday 7, we take a deep dive on the floods caused by Storm Bert. We catch up with Guyatt on Australia's social ban for teens. We find out how much a cow's burp costs and look at the risks around weight loss drugs. As usual, if you're enjoying the episode, please do like and share, or even follow us on your favourite platform. And remember, we're here 7 days a week at 7 a.m. with the 7 biggest stories on the Smart 7. Before we start though, it was on this day in 1990. The British and French workers digging the Channel Tunnel met in the middle, or close to the middle, and shook hands. The UK and France were linked for the first time in 8,000 years after 3 years of tunnelling. But it took 4 more years before passengers and vehicles began using the tunnel. Last weekend saw Wales and southwest England battered by Storm Bert, leaving at least 5 people dead and recording damage to over 500 homes and businesses. It was the first big storm of the winter, but with the globe warming, it's expected that there will be more intense storms, wind and flooding across the UK. Labour MP for Rhonda, Bryant, says the storm hit Wales hard, and he questioned whether or not the alerts before the storm were clear enough.
There was a view on Saturday evening that there should probably have been an emergency warning, and I think NRW, Natural Resources Wales, decided that that wasn't necessary. I don't know whether that's because the Met Office said that it wasn't, or whatever it was. We were expecting the rain much later on Sunday, I guess. But of course, if people had had more warning, they might have been able to do more.
Sian Williams is the head of operations for Natural Resources Wales, and she says it can be difficult to predict in advance how severe flooding will be, but that they will analyse all of the data from the storm to ensure that future warnings are triggered in time.
Every event that we have, we do reviews of them, and we will be looking at that. That is a report that we've had from a few different places saying that the people didn't have enough warning yesterday morning. So absolutely, that is something that we need to look at. Did something go wrong? Were the river levels that we use as triggers set in the wrong place? We don't know yet what the timeline was, but it is important that we review it, that we look at it, that we learn those lessons. Okay. If we need to do it sooner, then that's definitely something that we will look at doing. Okay.
The flooding also affected Northamptonshire with a danger to life warning for the River Nen, which saw a local caravan park submerge for a 3rd time this year. The Welsh Government says it learnt lessons from Storm Dennis and has invested about £300 million in improving flood defences. In Worcestershire, however, the town of Tenbury Wells was hit hard, with footage of the wave of water hitting the main street going viral as a tractor drove down it at speed, causing more damage. There were questions for Marc Lidderth of the Environmental Agency over why promised flood defences have not as yet been built.
So we, the Environment Agency, we've been working very closely with the local community here, with key stakeholders, the local MP as well, to really look at the option of what we can deliver a scheme for this community to better protect them. Now, those costs have risen, unfortunately, because of the complexity of this historic and heritage nature of the town. We are looking at every possible avenue, but there is this, what we call partnership funding gap. It's the gap of money that needs to be filled to make this scheme viable to get off the ground.
Nick Green is also from the Environment Agency, told the BBC that the scale of rainfall we're now experiencing can make it more difficult to cope.
When these sort of situations do occur, when you get 2 months worth of rain falling in a matter of hours, there will be impacts. So trying to make sure that the emergency services have got the relevant information that they need to protect the people.
This week, the world of tech seems to have been focused on kids and what they're up to with their devices. As time goes by, social media is being seen as more dangerous for younger teens, and this week saw Australia take legal steps to protect under 16-year-olds. Will it work? Does it make any sense? There is only one man to call when it comes to big tech and big law, even in Australia, and that's the Smart 7's tech guru, Will Guyatt. Will, what are Australia hoping to achieve with this ban?
Australia's populist Prime Minister Anthony Albanese says he's doing this to protect young Australians who've been let down by the tech companies. They've also talked about backing up parents and safeguarding future generations. Now, this is a brave statement to make. None of us would disagree that more needs to be done to protect kids online, but not enough actual research and evidence about the impact social media has on young people truly exists.
How does it work? Who's responsible for verifying the age of the users?
Under the new law, the tech companies are responsible for stopping under 16s using their platforms, and they're also responsible for ensuring there are technical means in place to stop them from accessing the services. Perhaps the biggest issue here is that Australia had promised to undertake a trial of how to block under 16s before passing this law, but because it became so popular and hotly contested and discussed in Australia, the law was pushed through. Currently, there is no way possible you can block all under 16s. Any tech that exists is in fact age estimation software, not age verification. Even those who claim their tech is working well are in fact landing at best a 70% success rate on accurately guessing the age of a social media user. So this is going to leave a hefty chunk of young Australians at risk, and the social networks are likely to pick up fines. Now, intriguingly, nowhere in this new law does it suggest that parents have a responsibility for stopping their kids using social networks. It's a bit like finding the video store for lending a 10-year-old Robocop on VHS back in the day, by allowing parents to play that tape at home to their kids on loop till it broke.
We've seen reports of fines of up to 50 million Australian dollars. Is that enough to worry big tech?
We're waiting for a little bit more information here. It's not currently clear whether these fines can be dished out annually or if it's done on a case-by-case basis. Now, Australia is not considered a huge market for any of the major platforms, so if the Australian government doesn't show any room for manoeuvre, platforms may well decide the country isn't worth the hassle. That said, at the same time, given that all states around the world will be monitoring what happens with this ban, maybe social platforms might sharing their homework on how to accurately predict just how old an account holder is.
Some of the platforms, particularly Instagram, have been adding more tools for parents, and now TikTok is also cracking down. Is that right?
Absolutely, but the cynics amongst us might argue that this newfound effort in protecting kids online is down to the fact that big law is now breathing down the neck of big tech. The week Instagram proudly announced their new tools to protect children, it was announced the platform was being sued for not protecting younger users in over 40 US states. And this week, the European boss of TikTok spoke at a safety event in Dublin, saying it was looking at AI and machine learning to better spot under 13s using the service, and it said it was also going to add age restrictions to its facial effects on the platform. Globally, TikTok is making steps to lock down more content on the platform from under 16 accounts. It's making tools available for nominated parents to have more control over what their child views on the platform, and they're now even spending money in countries including the US and UK to help support online safety education. Now, while impressive, the money donated is not enough to take these schemes countrywide for everybody who would benefit.
Ofcom research suggests that 18 to 24-year-olds are spending at least 6 hours a day online. Do we think that is higher for under 18s?
I would certainly think so, but we can't say conclusively because Ofcom doesn't survey this younger audience as heavily for their Digital Nation report. That's their annual media habits survey. However, it has been suggested that 1 in 5 under 18s are now routinely faking their age online. That's an alarming 22% of kids aged 8 to 17 who were surveyed saying they've just selected 18 to use on their main social network accounts. And you've also got close to 60% of under 16s saying they've used generative AI tools like ChatGPT this year. The younger generation is adopting tech faster than ever, and as a society, we're probably not truly aware of just how deeply entrenched it is.
And even the UN is weighing in on social media and influencers, but I don't think their findings of the study will shock anyone, will it?
A new study from the UN Scientific and Cultural Arm, UNESCO, found that a majority of social media influencers don't verify information before sharing it with their audience. Not a surprise, but a sad indictment of the world we now live in. It's just too easy to spread misinformation and general waffle on the internet. Perhaps more worryingly, 40% of those surveyed said the number of clicks and views their content got was more important to them than ensuring it was factually correct. Oh, great.
And finally, a tragic story from India, which is a warning to all of us about Google Maps, right? 3
Indian men died earlier this week when their car plunged from a damaged and closed bridge in the country as they travelled to a wedding. Reports said that the bridge had been closed following flooding in 2023, but the local authorities had not put out signs or warnings. Instead, the driver of the vehicle, who was relying on Google Maps at the time, literally drove off the end of the broken bridge. Local authorities have chosen to summons Google to court to explain why the bridge was still shown on its maps, rather than investigate who hadn't properly installed real-world signage. Sat-nav is brilliant, but it definitely shouldn't replace using your brain.
Still to come in the Sunday 7, a new warning on weight loss drugs, and Denmark's cows need to stop burping. A new generation of weight loss drugs, semaglutides, which are sold under brand names like Ozempic or Wegovy, have had a dramatic impact on not just patients but society at large. The drugs themselves, which were originally devised to help tackle diabetes, have been shown to have other positive effects too. But a report this week highlighted that there were dangers also. ITV News reported that at least 18 deaths associated with the drugs have been notified to the UK's drugs regulator over the past 4 years. The demand for the drugs have also led to people accessing black market versions, which may not be what they appear to be. Dr. Vicky Price of the Society for Acute Medicine says there are real risks in buying these treatments online.
Every shift I did, I would see at least one patient with something related to this. Most of the patients that I've seen have been people that have got it from an online source, so they've gone to an online pharmacy. But I've also treated somebody who was telling me how they got it from somebody in a plastic bag in a car park.
The ITV News team tested some of the drugs available online and were alarmed by the results, as Dr. Stephen Childs of the University of Sunderland explains.
Anyone who's producing these in a DIY environment is trying to maximise profits and cut costs. So I'd be very surprised if they were taking the due diligence to perform all of the necessary tests that are required. Especially with injectables, you are breaching your body's defences. So by injecting the material straight into your body, you run the risk of introducing pathogens that could cause anything from mild irritation, inflammation, up to toxic effects, fever and beyond.
Dr. Kath McCollough of the Royal College of Physicians says even with properly prescribed versions of the drugs, patients do need to be aware that almost all medicines carry a risk of side effects.
These are prescribed medications, and as such there are known and recognised side effects, particularly things like nausea, vomiting, particularly gastric types of side effects, and then more rarer complications such as things like pancreatitis are rare, thankfully. In the grand scheme of things, the number of people that are hospitalised is unusual and rare, and it's important to take that into account.
There have also been calls this week for a more coherent government strategy on obesity, with a new study suggesting that things like adding calories to menus may not be effective. Karen Betts of the Food and Drink Federation says that the focus needs to be on processed foods in supermarkets as much on food available through restaurants and takeaways.
About 25% of our calories come from takeaways and restaurants these days, and I would say that there isn't a level playing field between the regulation applied to packaged food and the regulation applied in out of home. It would be up to the government whether or not it wants to look at that. On ultra-processed food, there is no scientific consensus on what ultra-processed food is and whether or not it's a cause for concern. We need, as the House of Lords report said, much more detailed research on whether or not there is something going on there that we need to know about.
Last week saw the COP29 climate summit come to an unsatisfactory end in Azerbaijan, with pledges of more funding to help climate transition, but no major breakthrough in terms of limiting global warming. One of the principal contributors to global warming is agriculture, and cows in particular generate a significant amount of methane, about 100 kilos per cow per year. Now, a new scheme in Denmark aims to cut down on the amount of methane produced by cows by focusing on their burps. Christian Kock is a Danish farmer.
The problem with cows is that they are ruminants, and this process produces methane, which is belched out. I think the whole thing has actually gone very well. The fact that they came to an agreement is positive.
A new scheme will see farmers pay €4 per cow per year to help offset the damage done by the methane, and Denmark is trying to encourage a move away from livestock farming altogether. There's also a move to change the feed that cows get. Adding other elements to their food, including seaweed, can help cut down on the gas levels. Eric Myer of the environmental think tank Project Drawdown is enthusiastic about this fresh approach.
Great that portions of the industry are actually accepting that methane is a real thing and trying to make a plan to do something about it. I would say that at a global level, this is going to be a very, very small piece of the puzzle. The biggest concern, honestly, is that the beef and dairy industry might use this to say, oh, don't worry about us, we're covering our emissions, no problem.
Still to come on the Sunday 7, the BBC Marc Scam Week, and we find out how space food is made.
Right after this. Welcome back.
This week has seen the BBC introduce a Scam Week project intended to educate and inform about the risks we face in the online and offline world. It seemed to have been pretty successful, so much so that it got a mention at Prime Minister's Question Time on Wednesday, as the SNP Stephen Flynn used it to push PM Keir Starmer over the cuts to winter fuel allowances.
If you see a scam, you should report it. So with that in mind, can the Prime Minister advise the House? Is he aware of anyone who's promised to reduce energy bills only for them to increase? Is he aware of anyone who promised to back business only to tax business? And is he aware of anyone who promised to protect pensioners only to pick their pockets for their winter fuel allowance?
Mr. Speaker, I'm very glad to see him in his seat in this House, as I'm sure many of his colleagues in Scotland share that sentiment. What I can point to is a government in Scotland that promised to take Scotland forward and took them backwards. So I can identify the first one, it's right there.
Journalist Nick Stapleton is part of Scam Interceptors, a project which works with ethical hackers to try and track down the scammers, and he explained to BBC Breakfast just how widespread the issue is.
At the moment we've got 2 over in West Bengal, which are in Kolkata there. We've got another 2 that are up over on the far side in Pakistan, in Lahore, doing mobile phone provider impersonation scams, and then we've got 1 more up in Srinagar in Jammu and Kashmir. We know where they are mostly by their IP addresses. We have sort of rough locations for them, but not specific. In the cases where we are actually able to work out very specifically where they are in terms of the building, we always, at the end of the series, take all our investigations and pass them on to the authorities in the relevant countries. What then happens afterwards, not up to us, not always what we want. I think the biggest change that we've seen is the progression of something called remote access software. So those are apps that scammers get you to download to your phone or your computer that let them see your phone's screen or your computer's screen from where they are in the world, which is obviously not what you want when all your personal information's there. Unfortunately, these apps seem to be getting a little bit more nasty and allow scammers to do even more nasty things than just see your screen or control your device.
We've probably all brought the novelty astronaut ice cream for someone as a last-minute Christmas present, with the tiny freeze-dried molecules delivering a surprisingly tasty treat. If you've ever wondered what exactly astronauts eat and how it's made, this week CBS went to the Johnson Space Food Systems Lab in Houston, Texas to find out more about it. Grace Douglas is a NASA food scientist, and she says preparing food for space is actually quite complex.
What we're doing is looking at engineering and microbiology and chemistry and how we can make those foods stable for long amounts of time. So we have to make sure that they're safe and they taste really good for those lengths of time.
Rosemary Coogan is due to be Northern Ireland's first astronaut, and she's currently training with the European Space Agency. She's hoping to be eating space food on the International Space Station before 2030, but she says even getting to the training has been an exhausting process.
There was a huge number of people from all across Europe who were applying, and only a few selected in the end as ESA astronauts. So there were 6 rounds in total, and it covered all sorts. It covered, of course, your initial motivations, your educational background. There was a huge emphasis on your personality, your psychological assessment, as it were, and then going from a week full of complete medical testing, and of course your traditional interviews, lots of psychometric analysis, your memory. It was really the full works, as it were. So a year and a half in total, and the lucky ones of us have come out the other side of that with this training opportunity.
We all know that Christmas is definitely not the time to get a new puppy, but science has been busy learning more about what exactly goes on in puppies' brains. Gita Nadaskian is an evolutionary biologist and a comparative psychologist at Emory University, and she just might have the best job in the world. She's been studying and playing with puppies in an attempt to figure out how they learn and what their mental processes are.
We think that eye contact is quite important for building the bond between dogs and humans. There are a few reasons for that. One is oxytocin. There's been some work showing that when dogs and their humans stare at each other for long periods of time, it releases oxytocin in both dogs and humans. And oxytocin is often thought of as the bonding hormone or the love hormone.
So staring lovingly at your puppy is good for you both, but that's not all they've learned at the Puppy Lab. Brian Hare is an evolutionary anthropologist at Duke University, and he says that the way a dog approaches a problem or a puzzle tells you a lot about what kind of personality your dog might have.
And what we've learned is the dog that really just tries to solve the problem on its own, those dogs tend to be really great at problems that have to do with finding things, like in dogs that are going to be trained in detection work.
Wow.
The dog who realizes a problem they can't solve and kind of look up and ask for help in a way, those dogs tend to be dogs that are going to do really, really well for service and for helping people with disabilities. And so we've been tracking how their cognition starts to emerge.
This has been the Sunday 7. Wherever you're listening, do us a favour and hit the follow button. We'll be back tomorrow at 7 a.m. with the regular Smart 7. Have a great rest of your weekend. Written, produced and published by Daft Doris.
At Jiffy Lube, we car about cars. In fact, we're kind of obsessed. That's why we've been taking car of business with quick quality oil changes and service for over 40 years. And with things like our Carful Vehicle Review, where our experts check, fill, clean, and inspect your vehicle, you'll know we'll car for your car like we car for our own. Jiffy Lube. Car more.
Visit jiffylubedc.com to find a Jiffy Lube service center near you.